London News. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. This is London News coming to you on a topic that's been used and abused, common law. Now, I'd like to make it perfectly clear that common law is separate from other laws. Now, I'm going to put up the product I'm actually promoting today is the Sheriff's Office. And I'm going to put some videos up at the end of my waffle to explain the starting of the Sheriff's Office in the USA in 1689, around that time. It was carried over from England, it was carried over in Australia as well, but statute law is more profitable, and of course it was given up here in Australia. The Americans continued with the system today, and it is now used as a fighting back for liberty and freedom in America. You won't see that on the general news. You'll see it on Fox News, where the sheriffs have said, I'm not enforcing that particular law because it's unlawful, or in their case sometimes it's not legal. But anyway, what's really the reason we're moving away from the term common law all the time, because everybody who's fighting fines bring in the term common law. It's got nothing to do with fighting fines. It's got nothing to do with our Constitution. It's a complete separate entity. And the word entity isn't even the correct word. It's not an entity. It's an existence of common God's law. So I wish people would stop saying, oh yes, we're experts on common law, we're experts on stuff. You cannot have common law unless you've got a common law court and you've got a sheriff's system set up and in place. Then you can actually use common law to progress the good thoughts and ideas, common sense, wisdom, judgment, and all the good things that go along with it. But we're going to move away to promote Sheriff's Department, or correction, Sheriff's Office, because that is the way to go and it's the only way back. So please guys out there, if you're going to promote how to fight fines and how to beat councils and all this stuff, please leave the term common law out, because it's got nothing to do with it. It goes together like they all say, horse and carriage, marriage, sheriff's court, sheriff's offices, and from there on you have a system. And it's got to be based on the American system, hence that's why we use the American flag on the badge, because that's the only place in the world that the continuation of the old English system that goes back to Alfred the Great, when he made law common to all. The Vikings, the rich, the poor, and indifferent, was common to all. So it's got nothing to do with fighting fines. It's a separate, complete system in the world, and it's only continued in America when they have the Sheriff's Department. The Common Law Court of Justice in The Hague is probably another good example. It's run by barristers and solicitors and the Law Society, etc. They're doing a great job. We love them. And under the Common Law Foreign Judgment Act, they are actually giving us a little bit of support. At least it's supposed to be happening, but that's life. We're one day at a time. So let's move on. The Common Law Court UK, the CLCI, which started off about 4 years ago by a guy called John Smith, done a great job, was definitely committed to common law. He didn't have any sheriffs, but that's okay, but he did set up with another group of people who put some money into his kitty, and unfortunately John Smith got very fond of the money, forgot about the court, and decided to make some money out of passports and other things, which was more than chaotic, it was idiotic, and that's gone. So things are moving on. Now these particular people are now going to support our common law court through financial ways and means, and that's in the process now, so we will have a little bit of backing, and by backing us we will certainly back some of the great adventures by certain people here in my places, etc. like that. We know who we're talking about. I obviously got to be careful what I say, because everybody has infiltrators and people who are out there to sabotage you. And some of these saboteurs, which are very prominent in our society, the police are definitely, the fraud squad are looking into you guys, so watch out. Those people who rip people off in buildings and sell information to people for big money and do nothing, you're on the watch list, guys. So wait and take care. Time will come, because no man is above the law, and even you guys who are pretending to help people, or do nothing more than ripping them off. Your days are well and truly numbered. And that's not from me, but from the authorities themselves. Now, looking at authority, the police are the main authority for law enforcement, whether we like it or not, whether they're a private organisation, a private company or not, they're in situ. Now, the Sheriff's Department is an independent establishment. It's really the law, the land. We are not the enemy of the police. We're not there to upset the police. We're there and we will assist the police in every capacity possible, provided it is lawful. And we did send out a lot of informational letters to police stations all over the place in Victoria and probably other places as well, I'm not too sure. And we got great reception because we thanked them for their service. It's not an easy job today. It's a bloody hard job. It's a dangerous job because every time you go out there you're going to end up getting a smack. It's not a job for everybody. And the people who do it, great. Sadly, the quality has gone down the tubes. Someone told me that the only thing missing in the last intake was wooden legs. Now, that's not good, but that's our fault for not supporting law enforcement in general. Sadly, there are the good, the bad and the ugly in all organisations, and in the Sheriff's Office we will keep these people out because we don't want them. We just want people who are interested in helping others. Remember, common law itself and the Sheriff's Office will be humanity, caution and prudence. Look those words up and that's what it's all around. And it's what
America is now colonized. The colonists come over here, they're setting up camp. They bring with them this idea of English common law in terms of the governmental structure that they're going to establish over here on American soil. And look at this, look at the time frame here. 1634, we have the first American sheriff. Captain William Stone is appointed as a sheriff in Northamptonshire, Virginia. And look what happened just a few years later. We have William Waters elected as our first elected sheriff in the same shire. This is what, 120-something years prior to the Declaration of Independence. And already Americans are saying, we're going to elect our government officials. They're going to represent us. We're going to hold them accountable to us. And they were already establishing this principle while we were still under British rule, long before the Declaration came along. I think that's really interesting and exciting. There's over 3,000 sheriffs in America today. Most of them are elected. Most of them are answerable and accountable right back to the people, the voters. And that is as it should be. There are some states that have tried to do away with the office of sheriff. Connecticut was one. We have seen some individual counties that have tried to either do away with the office or greatly limit their power. We have that in South Carolina. Horry County, Myrtle Beach area, is the only county in South Carolina that has a county police force. We think about the city police force. Horry has a county police force. They still have a sheriff. You can't do away with the sheriff, at least not yet in South Carolina, because it's a constitutionally established office. But what they've done is they've limited the authority of the sheriff to a great degree. The sheriff there primarily runs the jail and serves process out of the court. They're not the primary law enforcement official, which makes no sense to me whatsoever, because it seems to me that the one with the most power ought to be the one that's most accountable back to the people. And I would tell you this, there's a movement afoot to do away with the office of sheriff being elected. And I would tell you, as grassroots conservatives, you should never, ever, ever allow that to happen, if you have any influence over it whatsoever. Are there corrupt sheriffs? Yeah, we've had some bad actors. We've seen some really bad examples in South Carolina. Over the last 5 years, I hate to even admit this, out of 46 sheriffs, we've had 15 indicted. And there may be more to come. That's shameful, but keep in mind that they need to be accountable back to the people. If they're not accountable back to you, you really don't have much say-so at all over what they do or don't do. And a sheriff can make a constitutional stand. We'll talk about that here in just a minute, by virtue of that. So now we got the westward expansion, right? People are moving out west to settle it, and they're taking along the idea of this sheriff with them. And we have some very colorful characters from back there in that era. You might not have known that people like Wild Bill and Bat Masterson, along with Pat Garrett, were sheriffs in the Old West days. And I came across this quote from a book called The American Sheriff that says that not only did sheriffs administer conventional punishment like we might think of today, but they did things such as flogging, banishment, and execution by choking. Can you imagine you're the sheriff and you got to go choking the guy to death to carry out the order of the court? That'd be really crazy. Well, that's the kind of stuff that happened. But the question is the agency properly called a sheriff's department, or is it properly called a sheriff's office? And why does it matter, and who really cares anyway? What do y'all think? I hear offices resounding out there, maybe the majority, and you're absolutely correct. Let me tell you why. This is a very important distinction. You'll see that sheriffs even disagree on this. We have sheriffs in South Carolina, for example. Some counties you have a sheriff's department, others you have a sheriff's office. So there's disagreement even among sheriffs. And as I get into this phase of my presentation, we're going to be getting into some areas that maybe are a bit controversial. And so stay tuned. I think this crowd can handle it. But this is an important distinction. So I went to Black's Law Dictionary to find out, because these are legal terms. And as Lauren said, it's very important for us to understand these terms as we are understanding these principles. So Black's Law Dictionary says that a department is a division of the executive branch of the government. It fulfills some type of administrative responsibility. So let's think about this for a minute. We're here in the city of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Myrtle Beach is a municipality under the laws of South Carolina. It's actually considered to be a political subdivision of the state. And because it is this government entity called the City of Myrtle Beach, within that government, we'll have departments. You'll have a police department. You'll have a fire department, a codes enforcement department, a planning department, a parks and recreation department. These are departments because they're divisions of this overall government that we call the City of Myrtle Beach. We see the same thing at the federal level, right? We have the Department of Energy, we have the Department of Defense, Department of the State, and so on. These are branches, or not branch is the incorrect word, it's a division of, in this case, the executive branch of the federal government. That's what a department is. It's like going to Walmart. All right, Walmart is a department store. So you have the men's department and the women's department and the sporting goods department and the houseware department and this department and that department, garden department, but it's all part of Walmart, right? These are divisions within inside. So an office is different in this respect. An office is a right and a correspondent duty to exercise a public trust. An office actually maintains a portion of the sovereign power of the state from a constitutional perspective. And this is very, very important for us to understand this. Because a sheriff fulfills an office, that office maintains part of that sovereign power that comes from you, the people. I mean, you know, we don't call it a governor's department or the president's department or the attorney general's department. These are offices, and each one has been entrusted with a portion of that sovereign power. For those of you from South Carolina, you know that we call our chief prosecutors of a judicial circuit, we call them what in South Carolina? Solicitors. Other states it's a district attorney or a state's attorney. Another carryover from our common law heritage, we call them solicitors. So back home in the First Circuit, we have a solicitor, David Pascoe, is a good friend, and he often would call me up and say, well, how are things at the sheriff's department? And I would say, I don't know, how are things at the solicitor's department? And he'd say, okay, you got me. Because it's a solicitor's office, right? And so I think it's important, the terminology that we use here, because there's power attached to these words. And this distinction right here is what gives sheriffs, as well as any other elected executive, the power and authority to stand on constitutional issues. You see, I've been a police chief before. I was police chief for 2 different agencies. And a police chief is an employee. A police chief works for the mayor and the city council, and if they tell the chief to do something, he's obligated to go do it. Now, if they tell him to do something illegal or unethical, he certainly can stand and say, well, I'm not going to do that, but they can also fire us behind, can't they? You know, when I was police chief, we had this favorite saying that, you know, sheriffs have to run for their job every 4 years, but chiefs have to run every day. And those can be fired at will. So you really don't have the power to make these stands. And it makes me think about what's going on in Kentucky with Kim Davis, the elected county clerk that's there that made a stand. And we're going to talk about her in a minute and the stand that she made. And you'll see how it ties back into this idea.
The governor, to her credit, just gave us a head up minutes before the press conference. We expressed to her that we do not agree with it. That's why she did mention in the press conference that she knows we weren't on board, nor did we draft it. Is there a realistic way to enforce this order? No, there is not, because we'll cut that conversation off because it's unconstitutional.
So there you have it. The backlash from our governor's recent public health order on gun violence really just intensifies by the day.
Law enforcement agencies across the state are voicing opposition and concerns over the governor's order, and some of our local leaders in Bernalillo County are speaking up the loudest.
Tamara Lopez was there as the Bernalillo County Sheriff made it clear his department will not enforce this order. And Tamara, although he's not on the same page as the governor, he says they're still working together.
Mixed reaction in Kane County, where the sheriff is on the record saying his officers will not take enforcement action against anyone who violates the governor's stay-at-home executive order.
WGN's Patrick Elwood is in St. Charles. He joins us now with more on that story. Patrick.
Micah and Joe, good evening to you. In the Northeast sector, there are 9 counties, and the sheriffs, 9 of them, say that they're not going to be enforcing the governor's executive orders by way of arrests or fines. I'm told because they have just too much liability.
Our phone has been ringing off the hook this afternoon inside the sheriff's office with people either complaining about it or applauding.
That's Kane County Sheriff Ron Hain after he issued a press release today outlining his approach to people not complying with Governor Pritzker's executive orders as part of the Restore Illinois reopening plan. Sheriff Hain says his deputies do not have legal authority to arrest or fine anyone not in compliance.
Our legal opinions have told us that the executive orders are not legislated law, and of course law enforcement has to live within those 4 corners of the law. So we face an incredible amount of liability if one of my deputies or I take action strictly as a result of the executive orders.
Hain and other sheriffs, part of the Northeast sector, are acting in unison.
This is not a law enforcement issue. This is not a time to try and test law enforcement on their capabilities here. This is a public health issue. The entire community.
As the battle for gun control rages on, more and more people want their voice to be heard, including the sheriff here in Hancock County. Law enforcement officials throughout the country have come out in opposition to new gun control laws.
People have the right to bear arms and the Second Amendment rights.
Many have said they will not enforce any executive order signed by the president, the sheriff of Hancock County among that group, writing a letter directly to the commander-in-chief, garnering support from his constituency.
I felt as the elected sheriff of this county, they're looking at me to be the voice.
The letter states that any so-called federal law that infringes on the rights of citizens will not be tolerated, recognized, or enforced by the Hancock County Sheriff. The Wood County Sheriff takes a more neutral approach, but will pay close attention to the fine print should mandates be handed down.
Depends on what those temporary mandates are and what those require me to do and what my requirements are.
And getting laws into the books may be a long way off and look very different from when they started. Sheriff Heldman believes some things will change, however, and in fact isn't opposed to every idea.
I think we're going to probably see some changes in the higher capacity magazines and so forth, which sometimes I wonder myself, is that necessary to have 100-round magazines?
However, he's quite sure his letter will never be seen by presidential eyes. Now, an executive order does nothing to change your constitutional rights, something the sheriff here says he took an oath to uphold. In Hancock County, Chris Delkamp, WNWO News.
Unconstitutional. That's what the Bernalillo County Sheriff is saying about the governor's new health order banning open and concealed firearms in public places around Albuquerque. News 13's Marilyn Upchurch was at the sheriff's announcement today. She's live at BCSO Main in downtown Albuquerque.
Along with saying his deputies won't enforce the governor's health order, Sheriff John Allen pushed the governor today to consider other options to address the city's continued wave of gun violence.
I have a fact for you. Criminals do not follow the law or a public health order. Is there a realistic way to enforce this order? No, there is not, because we'll cut that conversation off because it's unconstitutional. So there's no way we could enforce that order.
The order doesn't apply to private property and is supposed to last through October 8th unless the courts decide otherwise. The governor made the order Friday in response to an 11-year-old being shot and killed outside Isotopes Park. While the governor called the order a cooling-off period where leaders can work to address gun violence in the city, Sheriff Allen disagrees with the move. He wants to see lawmakers in a special session on crime bills to include harsher penalties for violent and firearm crimes.
I will be asking the Crime Reduction Director for our agency, the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, to lead a task force of various law enforcement agencies to focus on crimes with firearms.
The sheriff also put emphasis on doing more to address teen offenders who've been at the center of at least 3 murders in the city this summer. Back to you.
All right. How's everybody doing today? I'm the Butler County Sheriff, Rick Jones. I'm here today. Our phone, we're getting calls, we're getting emails, we're getting texts. The governor has, I believe, he's just completed the mandatory mask wearing for Butler County, several of the counties in the state of Ohio. It's going to be mandatory, the mask wearing. And I'm here we don't have the orders, what he's put out yet, but I can tell you this, that I want to make sure everybody understands I am not the mask police. I am not going to enforce any mask wearing. That is not my responsibility. That is not my job. People should be able to make that choices themselves. I didn't put this order out, and it's getting to the point. People are scared. People are calling and asking, do we have to wear the mask in our house, in our cars? It's getting kind of ridiculous at this point. But I believe, as the sheriff in Butler County here in Ohio, the economy is starting to try to get back to where it was. You can't go to restaurants, and at one time you were looked down on if you tried to go to church, and the churches were closed, and it's totally out of control. It should be left up to the individual if they want to wear a mask. If someone's sick, I can understand the mask wearing, but for all of us to have your temperature taken, to have to wear a mask, where is it going to stop? I've checked with some people that I know that work in the hospitals, the hospital staffs. Most hospitals in Ohio have laid people off because of this. They've laid people off. You go to the emergency room, you have to wait longer. There's people that are still not working because of it, and this makes it harder to wear these masks, and for everyday citizens that aren't sick and have no symptoms to have to wear a mask. I'm not a scientist, but I want you to know that the police are busy. Our budgets have been cut, the fire departments, everybody has less just in the past few months. This does not make it better. What you have is don't call 911 because someone is not wearing a mask. If the health departments want to control and take care of who's not wearing a mask, let them put a little yellow light on their car and they can stop people and go in. They will not like the response. People are tired, they're wore out. I think we could have done this in a different way. But make no mistake about it, I, as the Butler County Sheriff, am not enforcing any mask wearing whatsoever to the public. And my deputies will not enforce it. We've got more important things to do. It's all we can do to keep up with fighting crime, locking people up and making sure they're safe and the employees are safe.
You can register your property and get a certificate of title with the common law court. You can also register I don't register your car. We use the word register, but you know what I mean, list your car and get a certificate, certificate of deeds, a master deed. You get a master deed stating that you are the owner of the vehicle, not the authority that it's registered with, because anything is registered is owned by them. Anyway, it's London News signing off from the Sheriff's Office. Thanks for watching, guys. See you all soon. Bye for now.